The passing of the Pope and the passing of the torch ahead on Face the State. A day after Pope Francis's funeral, we're looking at his legacy with Bishop Earl Fernandez of the Catholic Diocese of Columbus. Plus, what happens next when it comes to choosing the new pontiff. Also, the effort to end qualified immunity for police and other government workers takes a step forward. What supporters and critics say about the proposed constitutional amendment that you could see on your ballot in a future election. Plus, Alzheimer's in Ohio, a devastating disease for those living with it and the loved ones caring for them. The latest efforts to help those in both situations. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. More than 1 billion Catholics around the world continue to mourn the death of Pope Francis nearly a week ago. Now, they're also looking ahead to who the next pope will be. For 3 days, tens of thousands of the faithful filed past Pope Francis's coffin as he lay in state inside St. Peter's Basilica. That led up to his funeral, also at St. Peter's Basilica Saturday morning. The Pope died early Monday morning after suffering a stroke and heart failure at the age of 88. He had served as Pope since March of 2013. Francis was the first Pope born or raised outside of Europe in more than 1,000 years. He made his last public appearance in St. Peter's Square on Easter Sunday, the day before his death. 10 TV's Carly Dion went to St. Joseph's Cathedral in Columbus the night of Pope Francis's death. Catholics across the diocese came there for a mass to pray for him. Carly talked with Bishop Earl Fernandez about the Pope's legacy.
The Catholic community filling St. Joseph's Cathedral to pay their respects to the leader of their church.
It was a bit shocking because it seemed like he had been recovering a little bit.
Pope Francis died Monday morning at the age of 88 following a stroke. Bishop Earl Fernandez, who represents the Diocese of Columbus, feels a special connection to the late Pope.
I feel it in a particular way because he was the one who appointed me Bishop of Columbus 3 years ago.
As the first Latin American Pope, Bishop Fernandez says Pope Francis set himself apart.
So he brought the experience of being an archbishop in Buenos Aires, being in touch with life with the poor and the marginalized, and he brought that to the universal church.
As the Pope of marginalized communities, he placed an emphasis on showing mercy to others.
Looking at people with the eyes of mercy instead of judgment and condemnation can actually make a difference.
Bishop Fernandez says in losing the Pope, they've lost a champion for peace.
The Pope was one of the few people calling for a ceasefire, but also to stop spending so much money on weapons. And let's start using it to help people who have been excluded from society.
And as they mourn his loss, Fernandez says this time of transition can be joyful too.
This year for Catholics is a Jubilee year, which Pope Francis had called. And the theme of the year is that we are pilgrims of hope, that hope does not leave us disappointed.
Fernandez adds his death is something that will be mourned across the globe by Catholics and non-Catholics alike.
The Pope as a religious figure is a bridge for unity amongst Christians, but also amongst all of humanity.
So, what's next? Between 15 and 20 days after the Pope's death, the cardinal electors will gather at the Vatican. They will seal themselves behind the doors of the Sistine Chapel for the papal conclave. That is the centuries-old process of choosing the next pope. Only cardinals under the age of 80 can vote. Right now, that group consists of about 135 cardinals. Of course, we will follow all of the latest developments. A major victory this week for a group looking to ban immunity for police and other government employees in Ohio. Attorney General Dave Yost certified the petition summary for a proposed constitutional amendment after a loss at the U.S. Supreme Court. Yost also moved to dismiss his appeal in the U.S. Court of Appeals, thus allowing the measure to move forward. Supporters say the proposed ballot measure is about holding the government accountable when someone's constitutional rights are violated. Critics say it would hinder law enforcement.
The officers have a dangerous job, they do. They have a very important job. They have to make split-second decisions.
The proposed constitutional amendment would end qualified immunity. Qualified immunity protects police and other government officials from lawsuits claiming they violated a person's constitutional rights, except when a clearly established right is violated. Steele worries ending qualified immunity will hurt recruitment and the ability of officers to do their jobs.
Who's going to take this job without any kind of protections?
The group behind the statewide campaign is the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. On its website, the coalition says, the existence of qualified immunity has led to a lack of accountability for our government and has hindered the ability for citizens to seek justice for the misconduct of government employees. This has resulted in a lack of transparency and accountability within government and has prevented victims of misconduct from seeking accountability and compensation for their injuries. Steele argues qualified immunity is not absolute immunity.
Officers' qualified immunity can and has been waived by courts in the rare incidents that they go out of bounds and violate Fourth Amendment rights. It is not some blanket that officers could just act with complete impunity.
Attorney General Dave Yost has argued the proposed summary language for the measure is not a fair and accurate representation of what the amendment would do. After the U.S. Supreme Court declined to stay a preliminary injunction siding with the backers of the measure, the Attorney General said in a statement, the Attorney General's office will work closely with the General Assembly on legislation to reform the ballot initiative summary process to protect the integrity of Ohio's elections and freedom of speech.
We reached out to the coalition for an interview this week, but did not hear back. The proposed constitutional amendment now goes to the Ohio Ballot Board for certification. After that, organizers would have to submit more than 400,000 valid voter signatures to the Secretary of State's office by July 2nd to get the measure on the November ballot. Youngstown State University professors are trying to repeal Senate Bill 1, the controversial new higher education law. The professors submitted a petition with roughly 4,500 signatures. They're trying to get the referendum on your ballot this November. The proposal will now go through several administrative reviews before organizers can begin collecting more signatures to put the repeal on the ballot. Senate Bill 1 goes into effect June 23rd. The new law bans DEI initiatives at public colleges and universities. It also prohibits professors from striking and requires all viewpoints to be considered during a class discussion, among dozens of other mandates. A new study by Policy Matters, a progressive think tank, says an Ohio family of 4 with a baby and a toddler would need to make $352,000 a year for childcare to be considered affordable. As 10 TV's Kevin Landers explains, with a state budget deadline coming July 1st, anxious parents are hoping for some financial relief.
She's kind of a very picky eater.
As a single mom of a 15-month-old daughter, Ryan Brooks says she spends $1,600 a month on childcare.
Childcare is very overly expensive.
Living on a school bus driver's salary, Brooks says she receives $750 a month in assistance, but could use a lot more.
Rent is up in cost, groceries is up in cost, everything is up in cost. So everything's going up, but they're not offering people more pay. So it's like, how are you guys expecting people to, survive paying childcare?
The average cost of an infant in childcare is $12,000 a year, according to the Child Care Aware of America report. Running a child care business isn't cheap either, says Michelle Bieber, president of the Ohio Association of Child Care Providers.
To carry liability insurance has gone up exponentially. There's a cost. Our food, if you are providing meals inside your facilities, those costs are going up. If you could ever imagine, we, as a child care center, we kind of almost function like a household.
Lawmakers are trying to come up with a budget to address the high cost of child care. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine wants to set the eligibility limit to 160% of the federal poverty line. That's just over $51,000. Lawmakers are holding steady at 145%.
Here is the problem. So we may go up to 160%, but we're stuck at 145. Even if we went up to 160, we do not have the workforce to be able to handle that.
Child care providers say raising income limits could add another issue. Bieber says daycares often have empty classrooms because of the lack of teachers. Low salaries are sometimes to blame, but not always.
I have a 401k, 5% employer match. So I have a wide variety of incentives, and we are still struggling to find teachers.
As for Ryan Brooks, she says the high cost of childcare means her apartment no longer fits her budget.
I was up to renew a lease here. That's not going to happen because, I can't do this and pay childcare alone.
Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
There are several programs to help parents with childcare. Publicly funded childcare helps eligible families pay for childcare services for children under the age of 13. The income requirement is 145% of the federal poverty level. The Ohio Child Care Choice Voucher Program offers support to families with paying for childcare whose gross monthly is between 146% and 200%. And the Early Childhood Education Grant helps families with children ages 3 to 5 making at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. Coming up next on Face the State, more than 200,000 Ohioans are living with Alzheimer's, and twice that many are taking care of them at home. We'll hear from the Alzheimer's Association about how they are advocating to ease the burden. And later, scammers can steal your personal information and even your voice. How to keep up with artificial intelligence to keep yourself online and safe online and on the phone. Welcome back to Face the State. If you or someone you know is living with Alzheimer's or dementia, you understand the devastating toll it takes. Certainly on the person the disease is affecting, but also on the caregivers at home, those who selflessly make sure that their loved one is safe, secure, comfortable, and has everything they need. I understand the toll too. Someone very close to me is living with dementia and has a devoted caregiver. Now, we should never think of people as a number, but the numbers do tell an eye-opening tale. The Alzheimer's Association says 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's dementia. 236,000 of those are in Ohio. 414,000 Ohioans care for mom or dad, grandma or grandpa, a spouse, or another relative at home. That adds up to 624 million hours of unpaid care, valued at more than $11.4 billion. Right now, the Alzheimer's Association is preparing for Advocacy Day at the Ohio State House. On Wednesday, they will push to make changes to help Ohioans better deal with Alzheimer's and its ramifications. The association is throwing its support behind House Bill 8 to expand insurance coverage for dementia biomarker testing. They say that will reduce the time for a dementia diagnosis and provide access to new treatments and care planning. They also want lawmakers to approve a public awareness campaign to increase education and understanding of the disease. Joining me now to talk about all of this is Trey Addison. He is the Public Policy Director for the Alzheimer's Association in Ohio. Trey, thanks again for being here today.
Absolutely, Doug. Thanks for having me.
So, are the numbers growing of people affected by this?
Sadly, they are. The numbers are growing pretty significantly. And part of that is because we're unfortunately in an aging state, right? So if you look at aging pockets in the state of Ohio, Northwest Ohio, Northeast Ohio, Southeast Ohio, those areas are aging rapidly. So is the diagnosis or lack of diagnosis. People are living with signs of dementia but have not been diagnosed because of proximity to health care and things of that nature. So unfortunately, numbers are growing, but we want to get more people diagnosed, particularly in those pockets.
Are you considering this a public health crisis?
I would call it that. And I think what our goal is with the public awareness campaign is to say, hey, we need to make the public aware that this is a crisis. This is an issue that doesn't just plague rural Northwest Ohio. It plagues areas in Columbus. It plagues areas in Appalachia. All of those areas are in crisis, particularly because our population is getting older, and for some odd reason, more people are living with dementia.
You talked about the public awareness campaign, and is it because people may not recognize the signs and you really want that to be out there?
That is so true. The signs of dementia can be elusive at the front end of the process, right? So people can say, oh, well, I'm just forgot my keys, or I just forgot to keep the car running in the driveway, or something to that extent. And then they start to progress, or they can progress pretty rapidly. And sometimes as caregivers or loved ones, you don't even think that it's an issue until you start to see the repetitive nature of it. What we want to do is equip all Ohioans to say, look, here are the real signs of Alzheimer's and other dementia. Here are the services and offerings you can get support and help your loved one navigate. And that is the key component. Here's how you can go get an adequate diagnosis. That is the starting blocks, because now you're in the era of treatment. And when someone gets diagnosed, you see the signs, they get diagnosed, you can be on a path to treatment, and that is significant.
Speaking of treatments, are there advances being made in research, treatment, medication?
Pretty significant. And I think now what we're seeing is you have viable treatments that are offered to patients, which is huge. When I joined the association, 2019, that wasn't the case. We didn't have treatments that people could get access to. Now we have the ability for them to go out and get treatments. We have drugs on market that are actually drugs that slow the progression of the disease. So when you're living in an era of treatment, the number one thing you want is diagnosis to put them on a path to treatment.
Let's talk about that diagnosis, because the other part of Advocacy Day is House Bill 8, which the way I understand it would expand coverage, insurance coverage, to pay for testing, biomarker testing. Explain what that means, first of all, and then why that would be important.
What that means is if Susie Buckeye was showing signs and she says, you know what, I need to go get some sort of a test to see if this is right. And she may have the ability to go get, let's say if we're there, a biomarker blood test when it's available. And she gets that test. Now, if it comes back positive, she is on a pathway, hopefully, to treatment. Without biomarker testing, you have no basis. It's the same way that you go into your annual visit with your doctor and you say, hey, the doctor says I want to get some blood work. All the doctor's doing is seeing and checking the basis through those biomarker tests to see where you're at. We're saying that should be covered for things like dementia. You can get it for other things, but dementia should be a major part of that.
Not covered right now.
Not covered right now.
Now, would this also be, say, a person's mother, grandfather, grandmother has dementia or Alzheimer's, that the biomarker testing could be done for the younger person who may not show any signs, but if they have the biomarker and they know it, before any onset, would it apply to that too?
They're not there all the way yet, but it's coming. And I think what we're going to find is if you have a propensity in your family of dementia or diagnosis of dementia, some family members will say, hey, I want to get tested when those tests are available. And that is a game changer, because now you at least know you have a basis. So you know, okay, these are the signs that I want to look for. 20 years ago, this wasn't even being thought of to some extent. Now it is. So now you can give families a basis or a baseline of where things are trending.
This we mentioned in the numbers we were showing, just how many caregivers there are. Just in Ohio alone, 414,000 taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's dementia at home. What kind of toll does that take on them? And obviously financially they're paying for things, but it's a bigger toll than that.
It's a huge toll, and that's where you see the major issue that we find as an association is that a lot of times the caregiver is burned out first, and sometimes the caregiver may pass away due to stress and other issues, and the loved one who's living with the disease outlives them. That's critical, and that's something that if you don't equip caregivers with their support, you're really setting everybody up for a slippery slope, and it's very challenging.
What kind of resources are there for those caregivers?
Great question, and I think one of the big resources, and it came out of the work that we've done with Governor Mike DeWine and his administration, we have the Buckeye Center for Dementia Caregiving located here in Columbus, and that's actually located, it's headed up by The Ohio State University, I think the College of Nursing. And the biggest thing is folks can come off the street and say, hey, what resources can I get? Right? Then you also have the Alzheimer Association, of course. And that is literally what we do. Our caregiving teams across the state of Ohio focus on equipping individuals who are in a tough situation and say, hey, you need relief, you need respite, you need a place here's some opportunities to provide that and facilitate that, because if the caregiver doesn't have respite, that sets everybody up for failure. So how can we facilitate that? Obviously, the Golden Buckeye Center can facilitate that. And you have a plethora of other organizations that work in tandem to support caregivers, because if they're not supported, it sets the whole family up for failure.
So is that kind of a situation where you'd have home help, not necessarily a home nurse or something like that, but are there programs out there that send people over to do activities with the person who's affected by Alzheimer's, hang out with them, as simple as that for a while, so that person, the caregiver, can get respite?
There are those types of programs, but quite honestly, Doug, not enough. And that's where resources need to be provided and facilitated to assist families that have a loved one living with this disease, because the more resources you have flowing, and we've been blessed in the state of Ohio over the last 4 years or longer. Governor Mike DeWine's administration has done a phenomenal job in providing resources to caregivers, but equally elevating Alzheimer's and other dementia in the state of Ohio. But we're asking the legislature, we got to do more, and we can do more with the resources we have in the state, because this is one of the most vulnerable populations that we have in the state, And sadly, that population is continuing to grow as the state ages.
Real quick, where can people get more information?
ALZ.org. That is pretty simple. Go to ALZ.org and you will find everything you need to find in the search. Just search Ohio and you'll see all of our chapters in the state of Ohio, and you can sign up to be an advocate right there. And obviously we'd love to have you and love to advocate on such a issue that needs to be fought, and I think we can get there in the state of Ohio.
Trey Addison with the Alzheimer's Association in Ohio. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for your
Doug.
time
Absolutely.
today.
Appreciate
Advocacy Day again coming up on Wednesday the 30th. Trey, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, next on Face the State, artificial intelligence scams. Watch out for phone calls that sound just like someone you know, and how making a cute social superhero could turn into a super headache. Maybe you've seen this trend. It's everywhere on social media right now. People using artificial intelligence to create action figure versions of themselves. It may seem harmless, but it puts a lot of personal details out there that could be used against you. As 10 TV's Colin Dorsey explains, scammers are searching through social media to learn more about you to use AI against you.
Hi, this is Colin.
Hi, this is Colin Dorsey calling from
Well,
10 TV.
it says it's me, and it kind of sounds like me, but it isn't. It's an artificial intelligence pretending to be me, and scammers are using that technology to try and trick you and take your money.
They're called deep fakes. They use someone's likeness, their face, a picture, or a few seconds of sound to create a digital version of you without you knowing.
Only a few seconds of video, images, or your voice clip is absolutely enough for a criminal to replicate your behavior in terms of deepfake.
Rishab Das studies AI and its uses for Ohio University in Athens.
When it comes to just getting that sample, where do they get them from?
Social media is a gold mine for all of these artifacts. We love to post, we love to share our life experiences with our friends, and unfortunately, criminals use that to learn more about ourselves.
Hey, Mom, what's up? One day you might get a call from your mom, your son, or your grandma in a panicked voice saying they need help. But it's not them. You guessed it, it's another AI voice. It's a well-crafted scam to fool you.
What is old is new again. And these used to be called the grandma call or the help call.
Leanne Lanigan with the Better Business Bureau says criminals are trying to play on your emotions with a voice that sounds like someone you know.
Hang up, call your person. I promise you, your person's going to pick up and say that they're fine.
And you've probably noticed everyone turning into dolls on social media.
It's fun, right? But it's not risk-free.
Rishab Das says you're putting a lot of your information out there to create these, and there's the potential for it to be used against you.
I like to tell my students that treat your voice like a fingerprint. Protect where you share it. So would you share your fingerprint everywhere? No.
Consumer Reports looked into that deep fake trend, and they say while it's nearly impossible to erase your digital footprint online, there are some things that you can do to protect yourself. The first being just be aware that these deep fake scams exist. Number two, enable two-factor authentication for all of your financial accounts. Then the third one is probably the easiest. Just do a gut check if you get one of these phone calls. If something just sounds off, it probably is. Colin Dorsey, 10 TV News.
Colin, thank you. All great things to keep in mind as technology continues to evolve so quickly. Well, thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30.